October 16, 2003, Continental Airlines quietly cancels its remaining orders for the Boeing 757. To the outside world, it was just a fleet adjustment. To Boeing insiders, it was a death sentence. By that afternoon, one of the most capable aircraft in aviation history was effectively dead. This was a machine that dominated the Atlantic. It could fly out of airports that grounded other jets. Pilots called it the Ferrari of the skies. It wasn't failing, it wasn't unsafe, but Boeing killed it anyway. At first glance, the decision looks like standard corporate restructuring. But when you look at the engineering data, the story changes. The 757 wasn't canceled because it was obsolete. It was canceled because of a gamble, a strategic bet that relied on technology that didn't exist to replace a plane that had no equal. And that gamble is the reason Boeing is currently losing the most profitable war in aviation. To understand the murder of the 757, we have to look at the weapon used to build it. In the late 1970s, Boeing was cornered. Their best-selling 727 was running into a wall of physics. The 1973 oil crisis had rewritten the rules of airline economics, and the 727's thirsty, triple-engine design was becoming a liability. Boeing tried to take the easy way out. They proposed a stretched 727. The airlines hated it. They didn't want a longer version of an old problem. They wanted a revolution. Boeing's response was the 7N7, the project that became the 757. And this design hinged on a single critical decision: the landing gear. The old 727 sat low to the ground. It was designed for primitive airports without baggage loaders. But the 757 was designed to stand tall. This wasn't just for aesthetics. By raising the wing, Boeing created enough clearance to install massive, high-bypass turbofan engines. This changed everything. These engines delivered a 30% leap in fuel efficiency. Suddenly, a narrow-body jet could fly transcontinental routes with the power of a wide-body. It was an engineering masterstroke. But hidden inside the success was a flaw that wouldn't detonate for 20 years. Throughout the 1990s, the 757 was untouchable. It opened up direct routes between secondary cities that larger jets couldn't serve. It became the backbone of charter fleets. Boeing even stretched it into the 757-300, a flying pencil that carried nearly 300 passengers. So why, in 2003, did the order book collapse? The common narrative blames the post-9/11 downturn, and while the lost decade of U.S. aviation certainly hurt, the real killer was simple math. Enter the Airbus A321. On paper, the A321 and the 757-200 seem identical. They carry roughly the same payload, they serve similar routes. But put them on a scale, and the problem becomes impossible to ignore. The empty weight of a 757-200 is approximately 58.5 metric tons. The Airbus A321 weighs just 48.5 tons. That is a 10-ton difference. Every time a 757 took off, it was hauling the equivalent of a phantom anchor. That extra structure was necessary for the 757's legendary range and power, but for shorter, domestic routes, it was just dead weight burning expensive fuel. When low-cost carriers began dominating the market, they didn't care about hot and high performance. They cared about cost per seat mile. The 757 was a heavyweight fighter in a market that suddenly wanted a lightweight sprinter. This leads to the obvious question: why didn't Boeing just fix it? The 737 has been re-engined multiple times. Airbus successfully turned the A320 into the Neo. Why couldn't the 757 get a modern engine to offset the weight penalty? This is where the trap snapped shut. The 757's Rolls-Royce RB211 engines were unique. They were shrunk-down versions of massive engines used on the Lockheed TriStar. They were bespoke. You couldn't just bolt on a standard modern engine because the 757's airframe required specific dimensions and thrust profiles that didn't exist off the shelf. For General Electric or Rolls-Royce to build a new engine for the 757, they would have needed billions in development costs. And in 2003, nobody was willing to spend billions on a dying airframe. Especially not when Boeing was distracted by a shiny new object. This is the final piece of the puzzle. Boeing executives believed the future belonged to the 787 Dreamliner. They were convinced that this revolutionary composite aircraft would arrive by 2008, and that a new clean sheet aircraft, the new mid-market airplane, would eventually replace the 757. They were wrong. The 787 was 3 years late. The manufacturing nightmare drained Boeing's resources. The new mid-market airplane was delayed, then abandoned. Instead of a replacement, Boeing left a gaping hole in their lineup. They assumed the 737 MAX could stretch up to cover the lower end, and the 787 could cover the upper end. They left the middle undefended. Today, Airbus dominates that middle market with the A321neo, a plane that prints money by doing exactly what the 757 used to do, but cheaper. Boeing didn't kill the 757 because it was a failure. They killed it because they thought they could outsmart the market. They bet against their own engineering legacy, and 2 decades later, they are still paying the price.